They call it the 13th Founding, the Dark Founding, a name whispered by archivists and inquisitorial savants, a phrase buried deep in the forbidden strata of imperial history. Unlike the revered Second or the lauded Ultima Foundings, the 13th was a creation wrapped in silence and sealed with a dozen layers of obfuscation. There are no public triumphs, no banners raised across Terra, no statues carved of new primarchs. In truth, there is scarcely a record of its occurrence at all. And yet, from this void of knowledge emerged something unprecedented. The Exorcists. They did not arrive with fanfare. Their creation was not celebrated but concealed, hidden beneath a veil even many inquisitors cannot pierce. But the Exorcists were not forged for recognition. They were made for a singular purpose, one too horrific to be discussed outside the cold halls of the ordo malleus. Their role was to do what no other chapter dared or could, to face the warp not with denial or avoidance, but with brutal, intimate familiarity. In the last decades of M35, the Imperium was unraveling along its edges. Cults blossomed in the cracks of crumbling hives. Demonic incursions surged like cancers through the stars. And in their failure to contain the Immaterium's taint, certain lords of the Inquisition grew desperate. It was a dangerous kind of desperation, the kind that leads powerful men to consider radical measures, the kind that births monsters in the name of salvation. Behind closed doors, the Conclave Plutonis, a cabal of inquisitors known for their radical methodologies, proposed a solution. If the Imperium could not hold the line against chaos by faith and fire alone, then perhaps it was time to forge warriors who could endure the warp's touch, not merely resist it, not deflect it with psychic shields or superstition, but truly endure it, stare it down, let it in, and survive. What followed was one of the most secretive undertakings in Imperial history. Genetic archives were raided, bioforges ignited, apothecaries and magi vanished into locked facilities from which no message ever escaped. Even the location of this monumental act of creation is unknown. All that remains are indirect references, a blacked-out star map, a redacted ship manifest, the sudden silence of a Mechanicus forge world whose name was erased shortly afterward. But from that silence, they emerged, not as an army, but as an experiment. The first Exorcists were deployed in isolated war zones under strict observation. No Imperial commander was informed of their origins. Their presence was not logged in campaign records, yet the Inquisition watched and recorded, quietly, meticulously, as these new Astartes performed their work. What they saw stunned even seasoned demon hunters. On the plague-racked moon of Vrax Minor, where reality itself had bent under the weight of Nurgle's rot, the Exorcists cleansed 3 continents in as many weeks. In the burning ruins of Hive Parafor, where the veil had been torn and Tzeentch's fire things danced in the blood of astropaths, the Exorcists advanced through warp fire with bolters singing and psychers burning. On the black ice of Goldex Theta, they stood silent watch as demonic entities clawed at the edges of perception, unmoved, unafraid. Reports filtered back to Terra, encrypted and tightly controlled. The Exorcists were different. Where other Astartes might falter in the presence of warp spawn, these warriors fought with grim indifference. Demons that laughed and gibbered at their foes, breaking minds before flesh, found no purchase here. The Exorcists did not break, they did not flinch. They slaughtered the unnatural with a silence more terrifying than any battle cry. There were patterns, too, small, subtle deviations. Librarians reported that the Exorcists' minds were heavily shielded, unnaturally so. Astropaths avoided them, citing an oppressive static in the warp. And the few Imperial servants who interacted with them off the battlefield reported a peculiar discomfort. Not revulsion, not suspicion, but a sense of standing in the presence of something not entirely clean, as though the Exorcists carried something within them, something they had locked away. By the dawn of MN 36, rumors had begun to swirl, Astartes of unknown heraldry appearing on demon-haunted worlds, executing extermination campaigns, and vanishing without a word. Astartes who did not request reinforcements, nor leave survivors among the corrupted. And then the sightings stopped. The Exorcists were pulled from deployment. The Inquisition vanished them again into the black. Some assumed the project had failed, or that the chapter had been destroyed. Perhaps the price of playing with warp taint had proven too great. But the truth, as always, was more complicated. The chapter had not been destroyed. It had passed its first test. In the years that followed, the Exorcists reappeared, this time as a fully sanctioned chapter, operating under the veil of inquisitorial authority. Their existence was now official, in the most limited and redacted sense, listed in the registries of the Adeptus Terra, but with minimal detail, recognized in word but not in ceremony. A chapter that did not recruit openly, nor boast its honors, nor even trace its genocide back to a known primarch. Indeed, to this day, no definitive record ties the Exorcists to any progenitor. The prevailing assumption, voiced only in guarded conclaves, is that they were derived from the Imperial Fists, their psychological resilience a hallmark of that line. But the Exorcists themselves do not speak of lineage. Their warriors chant no oaths to dawn. Their banners bear no echo of that stoic gene line. For the Exorcists, history begins not with a primarch, but with the fire, the crucible in which they were forged. They are a weapon born of necessity, a scalpel where others are hammers. They do not seek glory. They do not march in parades. Their name is not spoken with reverence in public halls, only in dread, behind closed doors, by those who understand what they are. They are the unmentionable answer to an unthinkable threat, a tool of last resort, shaped in secrecy, wielded with precision. Their founding was not a beginning, but a warning that there are forces in the galaxy so vile, so corrosive, that only the most blasphemous of solutions can be justified, and that the Imperium, in all its sanctity and tradition, was willing to make that choice. Because in the long war against the warp, purity is a luxury. Victory requires sacrifice, and sometimes sacrifice means creating monsters that can stand in the fire without burning. The Exorcists were the result of that choice. The Imperium's unspoken answer to the question, what happens when faith is not enough? When the Exorcists returned from the void of secrecy, they came not as supplicants seeking a place among the noble Adeptus Astartes, but as a blade already sharpened, a weapon held in the hand of power. And yet, few within the Imperium knew this weapon even existed. Those who did were bound by oaths far older than their ranks, enforced by fear not of censure, but of annihilation. To know the Exorcists was to shoulder a burden of forbidden truth. And so the veil of silence was drawn tight around them, a veil that endures to this day. The formal recognition of the chapter by the High Lords of Terra came not with trumpets and imperial decrees, but through a series of discreet adjustments to administrative ledgers buried beneath layers of obscure lex code and off-world authorizations. The Mechanicus logged the transfer of war gear and genocide tithes. The Administratum adjusted fleet deployment schedules. The Ministorum registered new recipients for devotional offerings, but nowhere was the founding proclaimed. It was not merely a matter of secrecy. It was survival. The Exorcists, by their very nature, threatened the comfortable illusions of the Imperium. They were a living contradiction. Warriors who had tasted the warp and survived. Space Marines who had stood not just against demons, but with them, if only for a breath. That kind of truth, exposed too broadly, could fracture the dogmatic walls that held the Imperium together. Faith in the Emperor, after all, was not built on complexity. It was built on absolutes, and the existence of the Exorcists blurred those absolutes into dangerous shades of gray, so they remained hidden in plain sight. In formal documentation, the Exorcists were recorded simply as active. Their records in the Apocrypha of Scaros are minimal. No records of founding battles, no detailed heraldry archives, not even a clear confirmation of their chapter homeworld. Most Imperial citizens, even many high-ranking officers of the Astra Militarum, have never heard their name. And if they have, it is only as a rumor. A cautionary tale of silent warriors with pale armor and red eyes who arrive unbidden and vanish without ceremony, leaving only scorched ruins and a lingering scent of sanctity. Their fortress monastery, if it can be called that, was established far from the beating heart of the Imperium. In the Narasima Reach, a region so distant and plagued by warp storms that even Chartist captains refused to plot regular routes, lies the world of Banish. A planet of marshes and acidic bogs, Banish is a place where the earth itself seethes and the sky weeps corrosion. It is a world unsuited for human habitation, let alone for building a bastion of Astartes' power. Yet here, in this foul cradle, the Exorcists built their sanctum, the Basilica Malefics. Rising like a black needle from the boiling swamps, the Basilica is a fortress unlike any other in the galaxy. It has no stained glass, no imperial icons, no statues of the Emperor or the primarchs. Instead, its outer walls are carved with hexagrammic wards and binding runes, not in paint or relief, but etched deep into the very stone, as though scorched by fire and sanctified with blood. Those few who have beheld it and lived describe the structure as a warding, a cage, a prison built not to protect against invasion from without, but eruption from within, and that is no accident. Within its shadowed halls, the Exorcists do not train as other chapters do. Their rites are not recitations of codex drills or sparring sessions with combat blades. Instead, their librarians, cloaked in silence and incense, lead aspirants through ancient psychic meditations, through memory drills designed to unravel and rebuild the self. Their chaplains chant not the litanies of hate, but the litanies of the broken will. Prayers intended not to inflame the soul with rage, but to hollow it, to empty it of weakness. Every corridor within the basilica is lined with mirrored steel, psychically reactive to the presence of demonic influence. Even a flicker of taint causes the walls to weep ichor. These are not aesthetics. They are containment measures, precautions, a reminder to every warrior that they are not merely Astartes, but the guardians of an internal gate. Secrecy, for them, is not a matter of pride or protocol. It is a shield, a necessity. When the Exorcists make war, they do so under orders that are rarely distributed through standard command channels. Their missions are relayed via inquisitorial cipher, received through silent astropaths bound to ordo malleus control. Often, their arrival on a war-torn world comes without warning, their thunderhawks screaming down from orbit as vox channels burst with static and fear. They do not coordinate with other Imperial forces. They do not explain themselves. They land, cleanse, and depart. Such methods have not gone unnoticed. There have been instances, rarely documented, never confirmed, where other Imperial commanders have questioned their presence. Accusations whispered behind closed doors. Why did they arrive unbidden? Why did the Exorcists deny support to loyal guard regiments in favor of isolating a single cathedral or schola? Why were thousands of Imperial citizens incinerated in orbital fire moments after the Exorcists evacuated? The answer, of course, lies in the kinds of threats they are sent to eliminate, in the kinds of things no guard commander, no planetary governor, no average Astartes captain is equipped to face. The Exorcists are not hunters of Xenos or rebels. They are purgers of the soul. When they land, it is because something has taken root. Something not of flesh and blood, but of sin and whispering shadow. A demon host wrapped in the skin of a preacher. A cult seeded not by ideology, but by dream. A child who speaks truths no man should know. And when such things are found, the cost of secrecy is paid in lives. To ensure that their work remains veiled, the Exorcists will enact total purges. Exterminatus is a last resort, but not an unthinkable one. More often, it is the surgical strike. A vox black imposed, all local records erased, witnesses executed or subjected to mind wipe by inquisitorial agents. There is no glory in these campaigns, no declarations of victory, only silence and the certainty that no tale will be told of what was found or what was destroyed. Even among the Adeptus Astartes, this extreme secrecy breeds suspicion. Some chapters whisper that the Exorcists are not entirely untainted, that their methods place them one step away from damnation. The more zealous elements within the ecclesiarchy consider their existence a heresy in waiting, a ticking time bomb buried within the foundations of the Imperium. The Exorcists are aware of this. They accept it, and they do not care, because they know what they are. They are the final answer to the question no one wants to ask. The blade drawn when even the Grey Knights cannot respond. The executioners of secrets too dangerous to spread. They are not meant to be celebrated. They are not meant to be known. In the end, the veil that surrounds them is not merely a protection. It is a judgment, a reflection of the truth that the Exorcists themselves have accepted, that to understand them fully would be to risk becoming them. And in a galaxy where knowledge so easily leads to corruption, ignorance may be the only remaining mercy. So the Exorcists walk in shadow, not because they fear the light, but because they know what hides behind it. There is a lie spoken across the stars by priests and generals alike, that all space marines are born the same. That beneath the heraldry and oaths, the rituals and colors, each one is simply a vessel for the Emperor's will, pure, unflinching, uncorruptible. But there is a truth hidden beneath that lie, dark and unsettling. Some Astartes are forged not by the Emperor's light, but by the edge of a shadow. The Exorcists are not like other space marines. They were never meant to be. And that difference begins with a ritual unlike any practiced by their brothers in the Adeptus Astartes, a rite whispered of in horror by those who know of it. The Exorcists do not simply train their initiates. They torment them, spiritually, psychically, and in ways no loyal chapter would dare replicate. Their most sacred and terrible tradition is known only to those who have endured it, the possession rite. It is the crucible in which every exorcist is made, a trial that no codex describes, that no chaplain preaches of, that no reclusiarch would admit exists. And yet, it is real, frighteningly real. The path to becoming an exorcist does not begin with strength or valor or even loyalty. It begins with silence. Aspirants are taken from Banish, the chapter's homeworld, a fetid hell of venomous marshes and acid rain. Before they are of age, those selected often come from the nomadic poison fisher tribes or the wailing swamp clans. On Banish, children are raised in agony and deprivation, their flesh burned by mists and scarred by beasts. By the time an aspirant is chosen, he has likely killed twice his age in predators and rival hunters. But that strength is only the beginning. Once within the vaults of the Basilica Malefics, the aspirants are not tested in the traditional ways. There are no arenas, no sparring rings, no contests of brawn. Instead, the neophytes are subjected to long days of isolation, locked in echoing chambers where no light touches, where only the whispers of distant chanting filter through the walls. They are denied food, sleep, speech. In those early days, most do not even see their trainers. They are alone with their thoughts, with their fears. with the things that stir in the deep corners of their minds. The purpose of this first stage is simple: to strip away identity. The Exorcists do not want men who cling to who they were. They want vessels, emptied, hollowed. After weeks in the dark, the survivors are taken, blindfolded, and marched into the Hall of Tempering, a vast circular vault carved from obsidian and iron, inscribed with runes that burn cold blue in the presence of life. Here, in the half-light of consecrated fire pits and censer smoke, the rite begins. One by one, the aspirants are shackled to a slab of ceramite and bound with null steel chains. Their wrists, ankles, throat, and chest are secured in ancient locks engraved with prayers in a tongue even most exorcists do not understand. A circle is drawn around them, not in chalk or ash, but in sanctified blood, the source of which is never revealed. At the outer edge of the ritual space stand the librarians. They do not wear the robes or regalia of other chapters. Their armor is unpainted, bare, etched with symbols too archaic to trace. Their helms remain on throughout. No face is seen, only the steady hum of psychic energy and the feeling, impossible to describe, of being watched by something vast and unknowable. Then the demon is summoned. To the average Imperial citizen, possession is a myth, a cautionary tale told by preachers about the wages of sin. But here, in this chamber of terrible reverence, it is real. The demons used in the rite are not named. Naming a demon gives it power, and that power is forbidden. They are referred to only as the intruders. Most are minor warp entities, bestial things with no true form, hungry and formless. But to a boy strapped to a slab, their power is enough to tear a soul apart. The summoning is done by the Inquisitors, Plutonian radicals who long ago abandoned the safety of orthodoxy. Clad in robes of lead-threaded cloth, they chant in low, guttural phrases. Their words do not echo in the chamber. They reverberate inside the mind, bypassing the ears entirely. A pressure builds in the air, a cold that is not cold, a heat that is not heat. The candle flames gutter sideways. The air stinks of copper and bile. Then the demon enters. It does not arrive with fire or screams. It comes like a whisper that fills the bones. The aspirant's back arches. His eyes roll. His mouth opens, but no sound escapes. Only smoke. His muscles twist as if resisting invisible strings. His heart races, slows, stops, and races again. Sometimes the creature within speaks, not aloud, but through the aspirant, warping his voice into something inhuman. It may beg, it may mock, it may scream the names of his dead loved ones. But always, always it tries to break him. And that is the trial, to resist. Not by strength, not by prayer, by will. The aspirant must fight the demon from within. There is no aid, no armor, no blade. He must hold his sense of self intact while the invader claws at his thoughts, dredges up every fear, every failure, every doubt. He must watch memories defiled, dreams poisoned, his identity dissolved, and not give in. For hours it continues, sometimes days. There are no clocks in the hall, no time, only agony. Some fail. They are not mourned. Their bodies are incinerated before the ritual is even completed. No names are recorded. They are considered sacrifices, necessary, tragic, and forgotten. But those who endure, those who banish the intruder not through exorcism, but sheer will, are reborn. When the demon is expelled, the signs are unmistakable. The body goes still. The air grows suddenly warm. The candles flare. And the librarians speak the final words of binding, a psalm that is never written down, only passed from mind to mind. The chains are released. The aspirant, now an initiate, rises on his own. He is changed. His mind is no longer untouched. He carries scars no medici can find. Some bear physical signs, a ring of pale skin around the eyes, a tremor in the voice that never quite leaves. Others speak of dreams, not nightmares, but memories that were never theirs, a taste in the mouth, a voice in the silence. These are not seen as weaknesses. They are proof, a badge of survival, a testament to the darkness that now fears them. From that moment forward, the initiate is an exorcist. The training that follows is brutal, but no worse than the rite. Marksmanship, melee, tactics, all are taught with relentless discipline. But the soul has already been forged. The flesh is now merely shaped. To other chapters, the notion of exposing a neophyte to demonic possession is unthinkable, heretical, madness. Even the Grey Knights, paragons of purity, do not suffer demons to touch them. But the Exorcists are not paragons. They are monsters crafted to kill monsters. Their purity is not untouched. It is tested, proved in fire and filth. And that is what makes them terrifying. They do not fight demons as outsiders. They fight them as survivors, as men who have looked into the abyss and made the abyss blink. There is no ceremony when the possession rite is complete. No laurels, no hymns, only silence, and the knowledge that the next time a demon claws its way into real space, there will be a warrior waiting, not with fear, but with memory. A warrior who has already slain such a thing once, from the inside. This is the secret at the heart of the Exorcists. They are not pure because they were never touched. They are pure because they were, and they won. There are moments in the history of a Space Marine chapter that define it, not in the forging nor in the rituals, but in the crucible of war, where the truths of their nature are laid bare before the eyes of gods and men. For the Exorcists, that moment came not during their founding, nor their first trials by fire, but in a battle so steeped in unclean sorcery that even the ordo malleus dared not speak its name without purification rites. The world was Totem 4, and the firestorm that erupted there would change the chapter forever. Totem 4 was not important. It had no strategic significance, no rare minerals or archaeotech vaults. It was a rock of forests and low-mass oceans, a quiet place at the edge of a neglected subsector, colonized by pioneers centuries earlier and promptly forgotten. When it fell silent, no one noticed. When the psychers aboard Chartist vessels began waking from sleep with blood on their lips and prayers scorched into their tongues, someone finally listened. The Ordo Malleus sent their augurs deep into the void, and what they found was rot. Not decay of matter, but of soul. Totem 4 was lost. The nature of its fall remains classified. Some whisper of a ritual gone awry, others of a minor warp breach that metastasized into a permanent tear. What is known is this. By the time the Exorcists arrived, the planet was no longer a planet. It was a wound. Gravity still bound it, but reality no longer obeyed. Trees bent toward unseen stars, rivers flowed upward into blackened clouds, the animals howled in multiple tongues. And it happened in the ruins of Hive Darshet, once a thriving city of 12 million souls, now a chasm of screaming metal and half-melted shrines. The Exorcists pushed through a gauntlet of demonic apparitions, shattering cult redoubts, banishing minor warp entities, and silencing the last few human throats that still tried to sing praises to whatever had claimed their world. It was there, in the substructure of the Hive's cathedral, that they found him, Cariath the Shrouded, a lord of change, not a creature of flesh nor even of fire, but of thought. A demon whose form was shaped by lies made manifest, a being woven from contradictions and memory. Its voice was a chorus of all the falsehoods the world had ever known, singing a liturgy of deception. It did not attack with claws or talons, it attacked with certainty. It whispered into the hearts of the Exorcists things they had feared to believe, that their trials had not purged them, but made them more susceptible to the warp, that their supposed immunity was a lie, that every demon they had banished was still with them, whispering behind their eyes. Many wavered, some fell, but not Enoch. He stepped into the cathedral alone, not because he was arrogant, but because he knew what was coming. This was not a battle to be won by bolter and blade. This was a battle of will. Cariath greeted him like a brother. The Lord of Change had waited for this, planned for it. It offered no grand monologue, no battle cry. It simply entered him, like ink in water, like breath into lungs, possession. In that moment, the exorcists outside the cathedral heard the screams, their master's voice, augmented and terrible, calling out in tongues. Some surged forward to break through. Others knelt in place and prayed, knowing their blades would be useless. Inside, Enoch's mind was a war zone. The demon did not seek to overwhelm him, but to become him. It spoke in his father's voice, used the memories of fallen brothers like weapons. It offered him visions of truth, that the Inquisition had used them, that the Emperor had abandoned them, that their purity was a masquerade. But Enoch had walked the halls of the Basilica Malefics. He had stared down the warp once before, and it had flinched. This time would be no different. Drawing on every litany, every scar, every scream he had ever silenced, Enoch turned inward. He invited the demon deeper. Let it see his mind, his soul, his pain. And when it reached the core of him, where the ritual still burned, he ignited it, not with sorcery, but with faith. A faith not in purity, but in endurance, in survival, in the right to choose. The Lord of Change howled, trying to escape, but Enoch held it inside, forced it into the open, made it manifest again in flesh. He shackled it to his body like a prison, and in that moment, librarian Goetos arrived. Goetos, too, had survived the rite, and he knew what was needed. Together, one with blade, one with soul, they enacted the rite of banishment. No mere psychic blast, no bombastic invocation. A simple phrase passed from one warrior to another, ancient and pure. Go not into me, servant of untruth. I deny thee. I have seen thy face and named thee nothing. Cariath was torn from reality, banished in a scream that was also a silence. The cathedral imploded. Totem 4 was lost, the surface scoured clean. But something greater had been proven. Chapter Master Enoch had resisted a greater demon, alone, and survived. The implications were seismic. The Inquisition sent wordless approval. The librarius recorded the event in a sealed codex stored in a vault that does not appear on any map. And among the exorcists, a new doctrine was quietly born. Possession is not defeat. It is proof. Enoch never spoke of the battle again. But from that day forth, his brothers looked at him differently. Not as a master of war, but as something greater. A man who had walked into hell and made hell flee. There are alliances in the Imperium so old, so secretive, that even the High Lords themselves fear to speak of them. Some are written not in ink or seal, but in silence, bound by deeds done in the dark and oaths whispered into dying ears. One such alliance, perhaps the most dangerous of all, is the hidden pact between the Exorcists and the Ordo Malleus. It was forged not in the fire of war or the glory of victory, but in a cold chamber beneath the surface of Banish, in a room without light where the walls themselves seemed to lean in and listen. After the exorcism of Cariath, the shrouded on Totem 4, the chapter stood on a precipice. The incident had proved something few dared even to hypothesize. That possession was survivable and even wieldable. Chapter Master Enoch Trismegistus had resisted a greater demon, held it within himself, and cast it out, alone, without sorcery, without becoming what he had opposed. The implications of that feat rippled outward like concentric circles in the warp, drawing attention from beings far more dangerous than any demon. In the months following the campaign, the Exorcists returned to Banish. Their ships entered orbit silently. Their survivors disembarked, not with fanfare, but as revenants, changed, haunted, and watched. The Exorcists did not speak of what had happened on Totem 4, not even among themselves. But down in the black halls of the Basilica Malefics, beneath chains and binding wards, there were those already waiting. They had known this day would come. They were not space marines. They did not wear armor. They did not carry weapons. But they were feared even by the lords of the chapter, inquisitors of the ordo malleus, specifically the Plutonian Synod. They arrived without announcement. A single vessel, the last theorem, detached from the warp near the system's edge, cloaked in a shell of psychic silence so complete it blinded every astropath on Banish for 3 hours. When it docked, no escort was offered. None was needed. The Exorcists knew these men, more than allies, more than overseers. These were the architects, the hidden fathers of the chapter's purpose. And now they had come to collect. The conclave met in the Scriptorium Malefica, a sealed chamber guarded by librarians who had sworn blood oaths of silence. There, in the presence of Chapter Master Enoch, Chief Librarian Gatos, and 3 captains of the Enochian Guard, the pact was spoken. Not renewed, spoken, for in truth, it had never been formalized before. All their prior dealings had been shadows and experiments, proofs of concept. But Totem 4 had changed the game. The Exorcists were no longer an experiment. They were a tool, a sanctioned arm of the Inquisition's most heretical doctrine. The lead Inquisitor, a gaunt and voiceless man known only as Vost, presented them not with demands but with acknowledgement. They had proven the unprovable, that a mortal, even a space marine, could face a demon not with purity, but with intimacy, and emerge victorious. This was not just a weapon, it was a paradigm. The Plutonians believed the warp could not be beaten by fire alone, that it must be understood, engaged, turned against itself. To most of the Imperium, such words would be heresy, but to the Exorcists, they were simply the truth they had always carried in silence. The pact was forged in that unlit chamber, not as a declaration, but as a confirmation. The Exorcists would remain autonomous in name, but in truth they were now bound directly to the Ordo Malleus, not as tools, but as partners. But partnerships have costs. In exchange for advanced war gear, rare psi-reactive relics, and access to information even the Grey Knights were forbidden from knowing, the Exorcists would offer something far more valuable: themselves, their bodies, their minds, their souls. From that moment onward, every neophyte who passed through the Hall of Tempering would do so not only under the eyes of his chaplain and librarian, but under the gaze of the Inquisition. The Plutonians expanded the hall. New chambers were constructed, sealed with iron engraved in languages older than the Imperium. Psychic null fields were layered across the walls. Suspensors and binders calibrated to demon frequencies were installed, and most disturbingly, summoning glyphs were carved into the stone by inquisitorial tech scribes using dust taken from planets long since rendered uninhabitable by chaos. The Exorcists did not protest. They understood the necessity, but within their hearts, unease festered. For the first time, the Exorcists were no longer simply recipients of the ritual. They were its custodians. They began training not only in resistance, but in containment. Librarians were taught demonology from first-hand sources. Captains were instructed in the proper procedures for identifying warp infestations within their own ranks. Apothecaries began keeping soul records of each aspirant, tracking fluctuations in psychic resistance and noting irregularities with disturbing precision. What had once been a rite of passage now became a system. Every candidate brought into the chapter was first subjected to a pre-rite psychic audit. A librarian and an inquisitor together would scan the aspirant's dreams, memories, and unspoken impulses. Most passed, some did not. Those few were never seen again. Whether they were deemed too vulnerable or too valuable remains unknown. No records of these failed aspirants exist. Their names are redacted even within the chapter's own archives. Those who passed were prepared with increasing severity. The deprivation chambers were lengthened. The soul isolation phases, in which the aspirant was cut off psychically and spiritually for weeks, became more intense. Some aspirants went mad before the ritual even began. Others endured with terrifying calm. These were often the strongest or the most damaged. In either case, they passed the final threshold and were changed, but not always cleanly. The new partnership with the ordo malleus brought refinement to the possession rite, but it also brought exposure. With every successful trial, the boundaries were pushed further. The daemons summoned became more dangerous, the rituals more complex, and the consequences more unpredictable. Some exorcists began to report side effects never before seen. A battle brother who could hear the unspoken thoughts of cultists before they revealed themselves. A librarian who instinctively recited binding chants in languages he had never learned. A captain whose blood burned the skin of psychers during rituals. These anomalies were studied, catalogued, and, when necessary, eliminated. The exorcists were not naive. They knew the danger, but they accepted it, because the price of ignorance was far greater. They had walked the path and survived, and now they would ensure others could do the same. The pact between the chapter and the Inquisition remained hidden, even from most within the Imperium. Officially, the Exorcists were an autonomous chapter specializing in anti-demonic warfare. Unofficially, they were a crucible, a place where souls were not merely tested, but tempered, where the line between purity and corruption was walked not with fear, but with purpose. To some, it was a heresy that could never be tolerated. To others, it was the only future that would allow the Imperium to survive the long war. And to the Exorcists, it was simply the truth of who they were. Not knights, not angels, not martyrs. Exorcists, made not to resist evil, but to know it, and still choose good. It is said in hushed tones by those who understand such things that the most dangerous warrior is not one who charges headlong into battle with steel and fury, but one who has learned to wait, to watch, to become the flame that does not flicker, the iron that does not bend. This is the essence of the Exorcists' formation, a chapter not birthed in haste, but tempered, not trained, but tested. And it is in this crucible of discipline and torment that they became more than soldiers. After the pact was sealed and the ritual of possession refined to an unspeakable art, the Exorcists did not rush to swell their ranks or fan across the stars. The Inquisition, despite its veiled hunger for results, learned that the chapter would not be ordered like pawns on a board. The Exorcists were not a blunt instrument. They were a scalpel, and scalpels do not work in mobs. And so the forging of the chapter began in earnest, not in numbers, but in identity. The Exorcists structured themselves unlike most other Astartes chapters. While they observed the Codex Astartes in many respects, the rigidity of its tenets was tempered, modified like a ritual blade, to suit its unique purpose. This was no accident. It was design, intent, a slow evolution from template to anomaly, guided by lessons few would ever dare teach. The first change came in the form of patience. Most chapters, once founded, seek to achieve full strength within a few decades, recruiting thousands of aspirants, rapidly establishing 10 companies, and deploying with zeal to prove their value. But the Exorcists, for all their martial might, were not interested in speed. They knew the toll the possession rite would take. They knew that 9 of every 10 aspirants would perish, or worse, and they knew the Inquisition would watch every failure with the cold eyes of judgment. So, they did not rush. Instead, they grew their numbers one soul at a time. The first company, the Enochian Guard, remained the core of the chapter. It was composed almost entirely of those first survivors of the earliest possession rites, including Enoch himself and the psyker warrior Goetos, now a figure of whispered awe among the librarius. These warriors, tested in the field and within their minds, became the mentors, the sculptors of doctrine, the hammers upon which all others would be forged. Each aspirant accepted into the chapter after the Totem Fourth campaign was subjected to not only the possession rite, but an additional phase unknown to any other chapter, the Vigil of Stillness. For 30 days, an initiate was required to remain motionless in a sealed chamber, surrounded by symbols of his former life, personal items, ancestral tokens, even preserved voices of family members. The chamber was warded against warp intrusion, but not against memory. During this period, the aspirant could not speak, sleep, or act. Only observe, only endure. The purpose was not deprivation, it was detachment. Those who failed often broke not through madness, but grief. Some clawed at the doors, others recited old prayers to long-dead gods. One aspirant gouged out his own eyes, claiming he saw his mother smiling from within the walls. These failures were recorded, and their bodies reduced to ash. But those who endured, those who emerged from the chamber with empty eyes and still hearts, were inducted not as Astartes, but as exorcists. It was not enough to be loyal, it was not enough to be brave. One had to be hollowed, stripped of all things except the duty to endure. Following this, the aspirants began their training proper, but again, it was unlike that of other chapters. The Codex disciplines were observed: marksmanship, blade work, tactics, but each was twisted to a deeper purpose. Bolt gun drills were conducted in warp-dampened chambers where echoes played tricks on sound and perception. Assault courses were constructed over mass graves and battlefield relics, filling the air with the psychic residue of suffering. Meditations were performed under the shadow of captured demon engines, bound and inert, but not silent. Always the exorcists trained under the weight of memory, not their own, but that of a galaxy screaming. And then came war. The first true test of the tempered exorcists was not a grand crusade, but a carefully selected campaign. The cleansing of Vornak's Stride, a rogue planet adrift near the Cadian Gate, abandoned by the Imperium after reports of psychic decay, rendered it uninhabitable. The Inquisition knew better. The exorcists were deployed not to reclaim or rescue, but to observe. No reinforcements, no extraction plan. One company only, the third. Vornak's Stride was a graveyard of thought. The atmosphere churned with psychic echoes. The landscape shifted with memory. Entire cities had collapsed into mirrored ruins, ghosts of their own histories, repeating endlessly. Demons did not roam openly, but bled into architecture, hiding in reflections, walking through dreams. It was not a battlefield, it was a whispering tomb. The exorcists did not falter, they split into phalanxes, each squad linked not by vox, but by librarian-sealed soul tethers, psychic bonds that enabled instantaneous communication without relying on technology. They moved through the world in silence, banishing thought forms, desecrating warp-choked reliquaries, executing what few survivors they found, each broken and babbling, shells of flesh long since infiltrated. But perhaps most disturbingly, they learned. One squad reported that the local warp signature fluctuated in rhythm with chanting heard only during the Hall of Tempering rituals. Another noted that demon echo forms mimicked the faces of exorcist fallen. In one case, an exorcist sergeant claimed to have been spoken to by his future self, warning of an ambush minutes before it occurred. This was documented, filed, and never spoken of again. The exorcists endured 2 months on Vornak's stride. No resupply, no contact. When they returned, they brought no trophies, only black boxes filled with data, samples, and the remains of 5 brothers who had, by their own request, been entombed in null stasis to prevent their dreams from spreading. It was declared a success, not by public proclamation, but by the quiet shifting of attention. The Ordo Malleus approved further deployments. The Exorcist structure was expanded. 2 full scout companies added to feed the slow, ever-turning wheel of tempering. 12 companies total. Not 10. 12. Because the Exorcists do not rotate their companies by tradition, but by necessity. Each one specialized not in battlefield roles, but in psychic resilience brackets. Certain companies are reserved for prolonged exposure to corrupted zones. Others operate in the periphery, targeting precursors to warp incursion. And the Enochian Guard, the first, remains a constant, deployed only when the veil between reality and madness thins beyond breaking. In this way, the chapter grew. Not like a flame, but like iron placed again and again into the fire, then hammered cold. Every brother a weapon forged not to shine, but to withstand. Tempering became a philosophy. It bled into everything. Their combat doctrine, their faith, their very language. They do not speak of victory, but of containment. Not of honor, but of thresholds. Even their prayers are different. Where other Astartes invoke the Emperor's name for strength, the Exorcists whisper, "I am the lock. I am the seal. I am the stillness in the fire. I do not yield. I do not burn. I do not break." By the close of M36, the Exorcists were still not well known. They had participated in only a dozen major campaigns, each one buried under layers of secrecy and obfuscation. But those who did know of them, inquisitors, rogue traders, navigators, even a few chapter masters, understood what had been built. Not an army, a legion of one. Each exorcist, though part of a chapter, was trained and expected to operate as a singular fortress. A soul so fortified, so drilled in containment and resistance, that he could operate alone in the heart of the warp and never be lost. It was not boast, it was expectation. Because when the time came, and it always came, the exorcists would be sent where no one else could go, into the abyss, into the rot, into the mouth of the lie. And they would not speak of it when they returned. They would endure. There is a silence that follows every battle, more profound than the crack of bolter fire or the hiss of cauterized flesh. It lingers like incense in the aftermath, heavy, cloying, reverent. For most space marines, it is a silence filled with oaths of honor, the whisper of duty fulfilled. But for the exorcists, it is a different kind of stillness. It is not triumph, it is reckoning. A moment to take stock not only of the battlefield, but of the self. For the war the exorcists wage is not just against the demon, but against the slow unraveling of their own humanity. This truth reveals itself most clearly in the rituals of healing that follow each campaign. There are no feasts in the Basilica Malefics, no long halls of banners celebrating glories past, no reclusiarchs praising martyrs before roaring hearths. Instead, after each return, the halls grow quieter, the air heavier. The very walls seem to sigh under the weight of what was endured. Wounds are treated, armor repaired. But the true injuries are harder to find and far harder to mend. Because every battle against the warp leaves more than burns and lacerations. It leaves imprints, soul scars, echoes, traces of things that do not belong in the realm of flesh and blood. And the exorcists, by their very nature, attract these ghosts like iron draws lightning. Among the chapter, there exists an internal rite known as the Orison of Scars. It is not written in any codex. It is not performed in the site of the Inquisition. It is not even acknowledged in official records. But every exorcist, from the youngest scout to the most venerable dreadnought, undergoes it. And it is in this hidden practice that the true cost of the chapter's existence is revealed. The orison begins not with prayer, but with silence. A long, hollow silence, deep in the Temple of Absolution, a subterranean chamber beneath the basilica, built not of stone, but of ceramite bone, harvested from the sarcophagi of fallen exorcists. Each step within echoes like a confession. Each breath taken beneath the arched ribs of dead heroes feels borrowed. Here the brothers gather in darkness, not all at once, never more than one company at a time. They kneel in rows upon the polished obsidian floor, stripped of armor, robes covering their forms, but revealing much more. The scars. And not all are scars of war. The possession rite, though once survived, leaves a mark that time cannot erase. On some, the signs are visible, twisted veins that pulse beneath the skin, nails like obsidian shards, eyes rimmed with unnatural silver. Others show nothing on the surface, but within their minds echo voices that have no source, memories that do not belong, hungers that must be starved daily with prayer and iron control. Each exorcist has his burden, and in the orison he faces it, not in solitude but in unity. A chaplain, known in this ritual as the penitent voice, leads the rite. These chaplains are unlike any others in the Adeptus Astartes. Their crozius arcanums are not shaped like aquilae, but as inverted spears, meant not to lead charges, but to pierce delusion. Their skull helms bear no laurels. Their litanies do not celebrate purity. They question it. The penitent voice walks slowly between the kneeling warriors, reciting no grand homilies, but asking a single question, again and again. What remains? It is not rhetorical. Every exorcist must answer, aloud, clearly, without lies. One by one they speak. I have cast out the voice that called me by my mother's name. I have not dreamed in 17 days. I fear what waits when I sleep. I feel joy in killing. I do not know if it is mine or a relic of what once possessed me. I no longer taste food, only ash. I fear I am not free of it. These confessions are not judged. They are recorded, not in books or scrolls, but in flesh. At the end of each orison, each exorcist steps forward and receives a new scar, not from battle, but from his chaplain. A single line carved with a blade forged from the iron core of a world once consumed by demonic fire. Each cut is placed with precision. The position and depth correspond to the nature of the wound confessed. There is a language to these scars, a codex of pain, understood only by the exorcists themselves. To outsiders, these markings would be meaningless, grotesque. But to the chapter, they are scripture, a map of resilience, a testament to survival, not just of the body, but of the soul. Over time, the most veteran of exorcists bear hundreds of these marks. Their bodies become tomes of war, each line a story of inner struggle. Some cannot walk freely outside their armor for the sheer density of scar tissue. Others wear ceremonial robes that drape like funeral shrouds, hiding the terrible beauty of their suffering from even their own battle brothers. But the orison is not only for confession, it is also for purging. If, during the rite, a chaplain senses a brother is beyond recovery, if his scars have begun to twist, or his words hint at possession not banished but entrenched, there is a final phrase uttered: "You have been heard." That brother is then led into the Chamber of Echoes, a room so shrouded in null fields and anti-psychic barriers that even the librarians cannot penetrate it. What occurs inside is unknown. No exorcist who enters ever returns. No record of their fate is kept. Some whisper that they are executed. Others claim they are entombed in eternal psychic isolation. There is even a heretical rumor, never repeated twice, that these brothers are not destroyed, but used, their psyches weaponized as demonic counter-instruments, tools even the Exorcists fear to wield in open battle. Regardless, the ritual serves its purpose. The chapter remains intact. The rot, when found, is cut away. And yet, for all its harshness, the orison is not an act of cruelty. It is mercy. Because the Exorcists know that no war is truly clean, that to fight demons is to dance with madness, and no one walks away untouched. The scars are not symbols of weakness. They are anchors, reminders, proof that the brother is still here, still himself, still free. In this way, the chapter maintains its cohesion, not through denial, but through ritualized acknowledgement. They do not pretend the possession rite leaves no mark. They honor the mark. They give it a name, a place, a cut upon the flesh that says, I see you, I hear you, you are still one of us. Among other chapters, such openness would be unthinkable, heretical. The idea that an Astartes would confess fear or doubt or lingering taint is anathema. But the Exorcists are not other chapters. They are not built on the myth of untouchable purity. They are built on the truth of tested resilience. And the orison of scars is that truth made ritual. When the rite is complete, the brothers do not cheer. They do not speak. They simply rise, robe themselves, and return to their duties. Stronger, calmer, seen. But sometimes, just sometimes, when a war is particularly foul and the wounds are too deep to bear, a brother will remain in the temple of absolution after the rest have left. He will kneel alone in the dark, tracing the newest scar with a gloved hand, and whisper the only prayer that truly matters to his kind. I am still me. I am still me. I am still me. That is what it means to be an exorcist, not to be fearless, but to walk in fear and not let it change you, to suffer and not let it define you, to carry the scars of damnation and never let them become your name. Not all threats to a Space Marine chapter wear the face of the alien or the demon. Some arrive clad in gold-threaded robes, bearing holy seals and proclamations of divine authority. Some come not with blade or claw, but with scripture and sermons, their words more venomous than any Xenos bite. Such was the case of Cardinal Rodrigo Nesun, the man who nearly damned the Exorcists from within. His arrival was unremarkable. A mere shuffle of parchment, a routine transit through a Chartist vessel, a well-sealed writ of visitation from the ecclesiarchy. The ordo malleus had approved his presence. The cardinal's remit was simple, even laudable, to monitor the spiritual well-being of the Exorcists chapter, to ensure their continued compliance with the ecclesiastic canon, and that no deviation had taken root during their long and secretive campaigns. After all, whispers of their strange rites and silence-cloaked wars had begun to trickle through the ecclesiarchal hierarchy. The ecclesiarchy does not abide uncertainty. At first, Nesun seemed as expected, a man of firm conviction, iron posture, and a voice trained to rise above the murmuring of crowds. His sermons were long but impeccably structured. His knowledge of imperial creed exhaustive. He quoted ancient saints none of the chapter's chaplains had ever studied. But more importantly, he asked questions. Many questions. Too many. Why were the litanies used by the exorcist chaplains different in cadence? Why did the Basilica Malefics lack a central reliquary of the Emperor Ascendant? Why were the statues in the Chapel of Iron not of saints, but of faceless warriors in agony? Most damning of all, he asked why no records of exorcist chaplains performing last rites on fallen brothers existed outside of the chapter's own sealed archives. No one answered him. He was, of course, permitted access, to an extent. The Exorcists understood that a certain level of inspection came with their arrangement with the Inquisition, but they did not permit intrusion into the Hall of Tempering, nor the Temple of Absolution, nor any of the sanctified crypt vaults where psychic wards pulsed in the dark like a slumbering heart. Nessun was told this was for his safety. He believed otherwise, and therein lay the seed of disaster. Unlike many in his office, Cardinal Nessun was not a fool. He was brilliant, in fact, too brilliant. A theological scholar who had been sent from one failing world to the next, whipping broken populations into zealous frenzies and leaving behind cities that sang praise until their voices bled. He had studied not just the holy texts, but the Apocrypha, the Heretica, and even, dangerously, the forbidden compilations kept beneath the ecclesiarchal spire on Ophelia's A7. He had read the margins of the Dark Founding. He knew what he was looking for. In the beginning, he simply observed, but slowly his behavior shifted. He began conducting interviews with the chapter serfs. He spent long hours in the basilica's libraries, cross-referencing liturgical divergences. He isolated himself from the Exorcists, retreating to a private sanctum he had carved out in one of the undervaults, a place he refused to allow others to enter. It was here that the corruption began to fester. Some say Nessun's fall was the result of simple ambition, a desire to seize power over the Exorcists, and through them, the ordo malleus itself. Others whisper that it was the constant proximity to demonic energies, the warp-scarred vaults and lingering echoes of possession that wore down his soul. But the Exorcists believe something darker, that Nessun sought understanding, and was answered. There is a certain irony in the tale. Nessun, in his growing obsession, came to believe that the Exorcists were not a bulwark against the warp, but a gateway. He concluded that their possession rites were not trials, but initiations, that their purpose was not to defeat the demonic, but to absorb it, contain it, perhaps even become it. It is difficult to say whether he truly believed this, or if the idea was planted. What is known is that Nessun found the Chamber of the Broken, a vault sealed by 12 sigils, each one psychically attuned to the soul signatures of the chapter's senior leadership. Within, the Exorcists stored those aspirants who survived the physical toll of possession, but had not purged the demon, the broken ones. Their minds were fragmented, their bodies distorted by the pressure of holding two spirits, one human, one not, in perpetual tension. These were not prisoners. They were monuments, warnings, and perhaps, in Nessun's eyes, possibilities. How he gained entry remains unknown. Perhaps he bribed a serf. Perhaps one of the broken whispered its name to him in a dream. But what is certain is this. Nessun released them, not to the surface, not to the chapter, to himself. He formed a congregation of corruption, the remnants of the broken ones, their bodies warped, their minds like cracked lenses reflecting too much light, were bound to his will through a mixture of demonic pacts and bastardized litanies drawn from his secret studies. Nessun anointed them with oil mixed with sanctified blood and warp-tainted ichor. He called them the Swords of Epiphany. Their creed was horrifying in its logic, that only by hosting the demon could one truly understand it, that the soul's endurance was not in rejection, but in synthesis, that the Emperor's true path was not denial, but domination, over self, over sin, over the warp itself. It was not long before they acted. In the final weeks of Ma 36, Nessun and his warband seized a docked strike cruiser, the Sanctum mourned, and fled Banish, leaving behind a scene of utter butchery. Dozens of serfs were found crucified in inverted chapels. One chaplain's body had been hollowed out, his bones rearranged into a prayer wheel. A librarian had his mind drained and reshaped into a psychic beacon, a trap to lure the chapter into pursuing its own. The betrayal broke the silence that had always been the Exorcist's armor. The Inquisition demanded answers. The Grey Knights, who had always viewed the chapter with suspicion, pressed for sanction. Even elements within the Adeptus Mechanicus began voicing concerns. If a cardinal could be corrupted in the chapter's inner sanctum, what did that say about the nature of the Exorcists themselves? But Chapter Master Enoch had foreseen such a possibility. Before his passing, shortly after the Totem 4 campaign, he had established contingency protocols, enshrined not in command structure, but in doctrine. A simple truth. If corruption rises from within, it must be cleansed from without. And so began the Purge of the Epiphany. Captain Veon Armadell, commander of the Enochian Guard, took personal command of the operation. Known for his precision and lack of sentiment, he was chosen not because of his proximity to Nessun, but because he had none. He had never spoken to the man. He had never been influenced. He was the chapter's scalpel. Over the next 6 years, Armadell's forces hunted Nessun and his warband across 13 systems. Wherever the Swords of Epiphany appeared, demonic activities surged. They infected cults with whispers of the truth behind the veil. They hijacked astropathic transmissions with sermons that caused spontaneous weeping and madness. They did not kill without reason. They converted. But the Exorcists did not waver. They tracked them, bled them, broke them. Each confrontation became more brutal, each purge more thorough, until finally, on the fractured moon of Gath Rimmen, Armadell cornered Nessun himself. The final confrontation is not well recorded. Only a single picked capture survives, a still image of Armadell standing over the broken body of Nessun, his robes burned, his flesh warped by demonic exposure, but his eyes still unmistakably human, still smiling. The purge ended that day, but the wound remained. In the aftermath, the Exorcists sealed their vaults even tighter. The Chamber of the Broken was relocated, its new location known only to the current chapter master and a single librarian. The ecclesiarchy was barred from the Basilica Malefics indefinitely, and the name Rodrigo Nessun was stricken from every chapter record, except one. His name was carved into the inner side of the Hall of Tempering's entrance, reversed and inverted. The only way to read it is in reflection, a warning that corruption does not always come in the form of the demon. Sometimes it comes with incense and benediction. Sometimes it smiles. There are battles the Imperium celebrates in marble and gold, sieges remembered by planet-wide holidays, martyrdoms recited from cathedral pulpits, wars that forge legends and break worlds. But there are other wars, colder wars, waged in the shadows and remembered only by those who fought them. Wars that must not be spoken of, even in victory. The Purge of the Swords of Epiphany was one such war. It was not a campaign of conquest. It was not about glory. It was about silence, correction, erasure. It was about making certain a betrayal never became a symbol. Captain Veon Armadell did not request command. He accepted it without word. The task before him was not merely grim, it was sacramental. Nessun's betrayal had pierced the core of the chapter, and it had to be answered with precision, not rage. The Exorcists do not respond to heresy with fury. They answer it with calculation. They do not burn. They cauterize. Armadell was the perfect instrument for this purpose. A veteran of over 100 exorcism operations, he was known for his absolute detachment in battle. Even among the exorcists, who are often mistaken for statues until they move, Armadell's stillness was legendary. His voice had not been heard publicly in years. When he issued orders, they were delivered through coded hand signals or via encrypted neural pulses directly to his command squad's helms. Some said he had trained himself to silence his internal monologue. Others believed his soul had been cracked during his own possession rite, and that what remained was discipline in its purest, most terrible form. When the order was given, Armadell did not ask for a full company. He took 18 exorcists, each hand-selected from the Enochian Guard, veterans who had not only endured the possession rite, but had survived the horrors of warp-touched campaigns without the need for psychic support. Each one carried a weapon customized to his history, a chain axe inscribed with banishment litanies, a power sword quenched in sanctified blood, a combi melta loaded with rad rounds blessed by the ordo malleus. These were not standard issue. These were tools of memory. Each warrior knew Nessun personally, not as a friend, not as a leader, as a wound. They had heard his sermons echo down the basalt corridors of the basilica. They had felt the quiet uncertainty he seeded in the chapter. They remembered the bodies of their brethren, left as offerings in the halls of faith. And so they followed Armadale not with loyalty, but with intent. The pursuit began not in open space, but in data. The swords of Epiphany had not scattered. They had a purpose, and like all zealots, they left fingerprints in the void, distorted vox echoes of sermons in dead dialects, psychic residue in warp lanes tainted by dream-mad navigators. Even among demonic incursions, their pattern was clear. They moved from one forgotten shrine world to another, collecting relics desecrated in ancient ages, artifacts long since thought lost or buried under quarantine protocols. Why? The Exorcists did not know. They did not need to. Their mission was not to understand. It was to end. Their first strike came on Veli Prime, a minor moon with an abandoned ecclesiarchy basilica, once silenced after a suspected demonic relic was uncovered during excavation. The swords had arrived days earlier, using a stolen frigate disguised with transponder codes from the battle fleet Obscurus. When Armadale's strike team descended, they did not land in formation. They teleported directly into the substructure of the basilica, into the sanctum where Nessun's heretical scriptures had been recovered and rewritten in ash and bone across the walls. There was no warning, no declaration of righteous fury. The Exorcists appeared like phantoms. The enemy was not unprepared. The swords had become something more than men. Their armor was corrupted but intact, covered in glowing script that writhed when observed. Their eyes burned with warp light, not blinding, but suggestive, inviting. Their voices layered in harmonics that echoed in the skull. They were demonic echoes of what exorcists might have been, had they surrendered instead of resisted. The battle was not long, but it was brutal. Bolters roared with blessed shells that detonated not with flame, but with implosive pulses designed to pull rather than scatter. Every room in the basilica became a kill box, every corridor a crucible. The swords fought like men possessed, because they were. And yet, the exorcists prevailed, not through overwhelming firepower, through certainty. Each movement had been calculated, each round counted, each strike driven not by hate, but by ritual. When the last of the swords fell, gurgling nonsense prayers through a throat that no longer matched his anatomy, Armadale walked through the carnage, inspecting every corpse. He paused at one, then activated his helm-mounted incinerator. No one spoke. This was only the beginning. In the following years, Armadale's team hunted the swords across fringe worlds, abandoned void stations, even warp-scarred wrecks drifting near the Eye of Terror. In each location, the cult had grown. They wore new armor, blackened, baroque, shaped like skin peeled from memory. They had begun creating hosts, mortals fused with demon fragments, grown in psycho-reactive cradles made of hymnals and teeth. They were building something, but the exorcists never let them. Each time they struck not to disrupt, but to destroy. No survivors, no records. On more than one occasion, they executed Imperial citizens who had merely heard the name Nessun. On the world of Rasson 9, they ordered an orbital bombardment after learning a single Vox scribe had recorded a broadcast containing fragments of Nessun's voice. The The scribe was killed. His family was killed. The Vox Tower was erased, not from spite, from necessity. Eventually, Nessun ran out of hiding places. The final confrontation occurred on the shattered moon of Gath Rimmon, a place so spiritually polluted, it no longer appeared on star maps. The moon was fissured, bleeding light into void. Nessun had made it his sanctum, a cathedral grown like cancer from obsidian, spires reaching into nothing. Around it, a fleet of captured vessels orbited like vultures, their hulls displaying sigils no Imperial system recognized. Armadel's strike force arrived aboard the Credence Wains, a silent cruiser built for stealth and precision. They did not announce themselves. They did not offer parley. The teleportarium engaged as the ship drifted behind one of Gath Rimmon's broken rings. 18 exorcists descended into the cathedral. What happened inside cannot be confirmed. No pick captures survived, no Auspex recordings functioned. Only one exorcist returned, Armadel. His armor was broken in 3 places, his face exposed, raw, burned. His helm had been torn off, his blade was missing. He carried nothing but a single data slate, which he handed to the chief librarian upon arrival at the Basilica Malefics. Then he collapsed. He did not speak for 2 years. When he did, he said only one sentence. He smiled when he died. The data slate contained a litany, written in Nessun's voice. It was not heresy. It was not a sermon. It was a confession. He admitted everything. The betrayal, the corruption, the manipulation, the false revelations. He called the Swords of Epiphany a mistake. Not because of their failure, but because of their success. He had seen too much. And in that final glimpse of the abyss, he had realized something horrible. He had been wrong. He had sought truth in the warp and found only hunger. The Exorcists do not display trophies. There are no monuments to Armadel's purge, but there is a single alcove in the Temple of Absolution. No name, no rank, just 18 candles, one for each who walked into the dark, 18 flames, 17 extinguished, and one that still burns, because Veon Armadel returned, not as a hero, but as a warning. In a galaxy ruled by endless war and louder proclamations of faith, where Space Marine chapters etch their history into stone and fire, there exists a brotherhood that speaks not of its victories, records none of its glories, and buries its truths deeper than any catacomb. The Exorcists are not a chapter of laurels and banners. They are a chapter of silence, and that silence is no accident. It is a weapon, a shield, a burden, and above all, an oath. This is the oath of silence, the quiet law that defines the Exorcists as surely as the possession right defines their creation. It is not an oath sworn once at initiation, like the litanies of loyalty spoken by other chapters. It is not a rite of passage or a test of endurance. It is a state of being, a binding of the soul. The oath of silence is not merely about withholding speech. It is about what one chooses never to say, about what truths must never be known, not to brothers, not to allies, not even to the self. And it begins the moment an aspirant survives possession. When the demon is cast out, when the last trace of warp stench fades from the air, and the aspirant's body lies motionless on the obsidian slab in the Hall of Tempering, the librarians and inquisitors do not immediately unchain him. They wait, hours, sometimes days. The survivor is left alone with what remains of himself, with the echoes, with the stain of that presence still flickering like a candle smoke across the inside of his mind. He speaks. They all do at first. Cries of pain, questions, whispers of things seen in the moment of occupation, visions of galaxies turned inside out, voices that wore the faces of lost parents or unborn children. Some speak in tongues, some do not speak at all. Then comes the silence. When the survivor's voice finally dies, when he ceases to try and explain what happened to him, that is when the exorcists know he is ready. That is when the chains are unfastened. This silence is not mere trauma, it is transformation, understanding. There are no words in any human language to describe what it is to be ridden by a demon and remain oneself. To name the experience would be to reduce it, to define something that cannot be contained in speech, and more dangerously, to invite it back. The oath of silence is a psychological defense, yes, but it is more than that. It is a containment field made of absence, a metaphysical lock upon memory, shaped by will. To speak of one's possession is to relive it, and to relive it, even in thought, is to risk opening the door again. So the exorcists teach every brother to forget, not by erasing memory, but by never giving it shape, to keep it unspoken, to let it rot in the darkness where it can do no more harm. This doctrine is woven into every fiber of the chapter's culture. In their chapels, no sermons are preached aloud, only gestures, symbols carved into the floor with the toe of a boot. In the training cages, exorcists spar in silence, reading each other's movements through instinct and memory. Even their librarians, those most attuned to thought, are forbidden from entering the psychic minds of their brothers unless granted explicit, ritualized permission. To be an exorcist is to be alone, even among kin, and they would have it no other way. This silence extends beyond their own ranks. When they go to war, the exorcists do not coordinate via open vox. They operate on encrypted pulse beacons, gesture-based comms, or silent psychic echoes delivered by sanctioned librarians. Allied commanders often find this infuriating. There are records of Astra Militarum generals requesting exorcist support, only to receive no reply until the enemy was dead and the exorcists already gone. Some have tried to demand answers. Most never ask twice. There is a tale, apocryphal but persistent, of an Imperial Guard colonel who intercepted an exorcist strike force on the surface of Arden's Fall, a world under siege by warp-cursed raiders. The colonel insisted on being briefed, on knowing what the exorcists were hunting. He even ordered them to halt their advance. The exorcist captain, identified only by the runes on his pauldron, walked to within 3 paces of the man, stared silently into his eyes for 30 seconds, and then continued walking. The colonel was found dead 2 hours later. No wounds, no signs of violence, just a single phrase etched into the wall above his cot. You don't want to know. Even the Inquisition, the chapter's oldest and most intimate patron, respects this boundary. Ordo malleus agents are granted extraordinary access to the exorcists' operations. They walk the basilica's halls, observe the rites of tempering, even oversee psychic diagnostics of neophytes. But they do not ask about what the exorcists remember. They do not question what lingers in the minds of veterans. They know better, because silence in this case is not defiance, it is survival. It is worth noting that the oath is not total isolation. Exorcists still speak. They recite battle orders. They invoke litanies before combat. They chant the names of severance, ritual verses used to sever psychic bonds, often chanted in low harmony during exorcism operations. But even here, the words are carefully chosen and never personal. There is no idle conversation among the exorcists. No jokes, no tales of past glories, no songs. Silence is the only song they trust. And when a brother breaks the oath, it does happen. Rarely. A veteran may begin to whisper in his sleep. A neophyte might ask too many questions. A librarian may detect echoes in the psychic ether that should not exist. Thoughts leaking through where there should be none. The response is immediate. A penitent voice is dispatched, a chaplain bearing the authority to investigate breaches of silence. The accused is not interrogated. There is no trial. Instead, the brother is taken to the chamber of restraint, deep within the basilica, where his mind is walked by the chaplain under triple-bound psychic wards. The process is slow and often fatal, not because the chaplain seeks to destroy, but because whatever leaks from a broken silence is not meant to be seen again. If the brother survives and is judged clear, he is returned to duty with a fresh scar over the heart, a reminder that silence is not absence, but discipline. If he does not survive, he is recorded in the Liber Sepulchrum, a sealed codex that contains only numbers, never names. The Exorcists do not remember their failures. They bury them. Why do they go to such lengths? Because they know what it means to be vulnerable, to have stood on the edge of the soul and felt something other reach across and touch it. They understand the temptation to share, to speak of what they saw, what they felt. The desire to explain, to be understood, but they also know that to speak is to spread it. The demon is not merely a beast, it is a story, a lie, a thought that seeks replication, and the more it is told, the stronger it becomes. To name the darkness is to give it form, and to give it form is to invite it in. So the exorcists remain silent, not because they are afraid, but because they remember what fear feels like, and they will not let it breathe. There is no more terrifying sound on the battlefield than the silence that follows an exorcist strike. No war cries, no screams, only the sound of boots on stone, of bolters cycling, of bodies falling. And then nothing. A silence so complete it leaves even demons questioning their reality. That is the oath, not a vow of humility, not an act of secrecy, but a bulwark. Because in the galaxy's screaming, bleeding night, the exorcists are not shouting back. They are listening, and they are enduring. There are demons whose names ripple through the Imperium like a scream through still water, who are not merely spawn of the warp, but its architects, nightmares that think, that plot, that remember. One such entity carved a name for itself, not in the texts of imperial scholars or the litanies of ecclesiarchs, but in the blood-soaked ground of the Ashen system. It is remembered only by those who must, as the horned god. It began, as most blasphemies do, with whispers. Ashen's outer colonies, once thriving mining worlds and agricultural satellites, fell into silence. Imperial envoys sent to investigate never returned. Trade routes dried up, pilgrimage vessels rerouted. And beneath it all, astropaths tasked with translating these growing absences began to suffer. Their minds rotted from within. One by one, they collapsed into seizures, scrawling horned sigils on the floor in their own blood, shrieking a name no one had taught them. By the time the Inquisition confirmed the incursion, the Ashen system was no longer a realm of man. It was a cathedral to madness, a system where stars pulsed like infected wounds, and planets bled vapors of sorrow into the void. At its heart, a demonic intellect had taken root, a prince of the warp, a monstrous beast that had once been a man, perhaps, or something close enough to remember what it lost. The horned god. The exorcists did not wait for permission. It is a mistake often made by outsiders, the assumption that this chapter moves at the pace of high command, that they defer to segmentum strategies, or await authorization from Terra. They do not. When the warp opens, they move. Not because they are rebellious, because they were made to, because they must. Chapter Master Emir Vasaphon, newly appointed and colder than the obsidian spires of Banish, dispatched 3 companies, the 2nd, the 7th, and the Enochian Guard. Each force moved independently, carried aboard ships wrapped in psychic damping fields, bearing cargo sanctified not by the ecclesiarchy, but by rites unknown to even the Ordo Hereticus. The Inquisition did not protest. They had already sent agents to Ashen. None had returned. What the Exorcists found was not a war zone, it was a theater. The Horned God had reshaped the system as a performance, each planet a stage of perverse symbolism, each orbiting ruin a chorus line of death. On Carthus Prime, a planet of once magnificent hives, the population had crucified themselves in concentric circles, their bodies spelling out profane runes visible only from low orbit. On Junovel, the forests bled ichor, and every tree screamed the same sentence when cut. On the moon, Dale 4, there was no sound at all. Not even the void silence of space, but a psychic negation, as if the concept of sound had been stolen. This was not random. The Horned God was building something, a ritual, not of summoning, but of ascension. It did not want to be remembered as a prince. It wanted to be worshipped. The Exorcists did not falter. The second company landed on Carthus and executed the silent maneuver, a planetary assault conducted without any communications. The brothers operated entirely through pre-established sequences and psychic bonding, deploying in trios that moved through the city ruins like surgical blades. Every cult stronghold was purged, every warp gateway sealed, every psionic nexus reduced to ash. But Carthus was not the source. It was a mouth, not a throat. The scream was louder elsewhere. The seventh company struck Dale 4 next, piercing its null barrier with a specialized librarius war capsule known only as the Iron Seed. Upon entry, their minds were bombarded with anti-thoughts, reversals of reason that clawed at identity. Chaplain Varun led his squad through the silence by reciting the reverse benediction, a chant spoken backward in a tonal resonance that created a psychic vacuum. This did not block the madness, it contained it. For 5 days, the seventh battled through structures that were dreamed, not built, cathedrals that flickered between geometry and impossible anatomy, hallways that fed on memory. They found no demon. Because the Horned God was not on a planet, it was the system. A sentient infection spread across worlds, commanding its parts like a conductor before a choir of corpses. Its true form, or the closest equivalent, was finally located by the Enochian Guard, aboard an ancient space station caught in a decaying orbit between Ashen Secundus and a shattered asteroid belt. The station was once an ecclesiarchal penitentiary known as St. Riol's Folly, long abandoned after a warp breach during the Age of Apostasy. The Horned God had made it his throne. The Enochian Guard did not ask for reinforcement. They knew what they were walking into. The boarding action was swift, but unlike any other war the Guard had ever fought. The station had become alive, corridors shifted as they moved, bulkheads pulsed like lungs, voxcasters screamed hymns to a future that did not exist. Time itself was unreliable. One squad reported engaging the same enemy 5 times in the same corridor, each instance bloodier than the last. At the center of it all was the Horned God. Its body was a fusion of flesh, brass, and stolen memory. Antlers that spiraled into fractal dimensions, a face that showed the viewer's own expression twisted in agony. Its voice was not sound, but presence, infecting thoughts with doubt, confidence, love, terror, anything to gain a foothold. It offered visions of peace. It offered victory. It offered forgiveness. The Exorcists answered in silence. Librarian Heskos initiated the Rite of the 9-Wound Star, a psychic binding sequence normally used to contain lesser demon hosts. It would not be enough to kill the Horned God, but it would anchor him, make him real, and once real, he could bleed. The Enochian Guard advanced in phalanx, their bolters loaded with sanctified penetrator rounds, each one engraved with a syllable of the Emperor's hidden name. They did not chant, they did not scream. They walked, forward, relentless. Each wound they took, they ignored. each scream the demon manifested, the voices of mothers, lovers, fallen brothers, was met with the same response. Bolter, step, silence. Finally, Brother Sergeant Salvin reached the horned god. He did not speak. He activated his war spear, a relic forged from the remains of the first Exorcist dreadnought, its edge sharpened by the will of 7 librarians over 2 decades. He drove it into the beast's core. The horned god laughed. Then it screamed. The station collapsed in on itself as the demonic presence attempted to unmake reality in its death throes. 3 exorcists remained behind to hold the rift shut from the inside. The rest escaped as the construct imploded into a singularity of shrieking flesh and silence. The system was declared cleansed, the surviving planets sterilized. The Inquisition offered thanks, but the exorcists did not celebrate. Upon returning to Banish, each brother who had faced the horned god was subjected to the orison of scars. Several did not survive. One tried to carve the demon's name into his own chest, not out of worship, but to forget it. His mind could not bear holding the memory silently. He was entombed in null steel. The rest resumed their vigil. In the Exorcist's records, the Ashen campaign is listed under one word: muted. Because they do not record victories, they end them, and then they forget. Not because the battle was unworthy, but because the memory is. The horned god is gone, but the silence it left behind still echoes. Most Space Marine chapters are as rigid in organization as they are in doctrine. 10 companies, 4 battle types, command structures etched in stone and scripture. The Codex Astartes does not leave much room for invention, and where deviation occurs, it is noted, scrutinized, and justified. The Exorcists, however, are a paradox the Codex never accounted for. To outsiders, they appear largely compliant. 10 battle companies, veteran cadres, scouts, apothecaries, librarians. But this facade is only skin deep. Beneath the armor, beneath the chapter markings, and the sanctioned silence, the Exorcists are bound together by something older than the Codex and far more arcane: the Silent Brotherhoods. These are not companies, not formal divisions, not hierarchies. They are cultic structures, psychic lineages, spiritual orders, internal subcults that bind the chapter together, not by command, but by shared initiation. Most are never spoken of aloud. Some do not even have names in Low Gothic, and they exist alongside the Codex structure, not in defiance of it, but in symbiosis. Each exorcist belongs to one, and in doing so he carries not just his chapter's burden, but the intimate weight of a deeper truth. These brotherhoods are many, each formed to fulfill a specific function of spiritual containment, memory preservation, or psychic defense. They are not optional. They are not decorative. They are vital. Survival mechanisms evolved over centuries of battling not just demons, but what demons leave behind. The oldest of them all is the Enochian Guard, often misunderstood by outsiders as simply the first company of veterans. In truth, the Enochians are a brotherhood of memory. Each member has served in multiple exorcisms, not merely as warriors, but as witnesses. Their minds are host to battle liturgies, psychic imprints of rituals, and demon banishment procedures too dangerous to be recorded in any tome. These memories are passed not through writing, but ritual dreaming. Upon ascension to the Enochian Guard, an exorcist undergoes the rite of the watchful flame. For 3 days and 3 nights, he is placed in sensory isolation and flooded with incense laced with neuroreactive oils harvested from psychoactive marsh fungus on Banish. Then a librarian of the guard, known only as a remembrancer, enters the chamber. Together they sleep, and in that shared sleep, the remembrancer opens the flame, a metaphysical lattice of memory chains linking battle to battle, demon to demon,
wound to wound. The initiate must navigate these memories, relive them, survive them, absorb them. Many do not return. Those who do emerge changed, hardened, haunted. Their eyes forever carry the slight shimmer of refracted light, the gaze of one who has seen not just war, but the memory of war layered over itself 1,000-fold. These brothers become the backbone of any major campaign. When the Ordo Malleus deploys Exorcists to purge a world warped by long-dormant heresy, it is often an Enochian who guides the cleansing. They know what happened there before. They remember, even if it was never spoken. Another brotherhood, older still and far stranger, is known as the Choir of the Bound Tongue. Their role is not to fight, not in the way others do. They are psychic anchors, a stabilizing force in the minds of their brothers. Each member of the choir is trained from the scout company not to speak, but to listen, to hear the micro-inflections of demonic presence, the tonal residue of warp echoes in Vox transmissions, the tremor of falsehood in a brother's voice. They train by enduring hours of recorded demonic sermons played in reverse, slowed, layered atop sacred music. Over time, their minds learn to filter, to reject, to sift the human from the inhuman. These brothers are rarely seen on the battlefield. When they are deployed, it is often in teams of 3, positioned behind the lines, heads bowed, listening. If they speak, it means something has gone terribly wrong. Then there are the Quietus Sons, whose very existence is debated even among exorcists. They are the executioners within a chapter already feared for its extremity. No insignia, no name, no assigned company. When a brother's mind fractures beyond repair, when his silence begins to crack, and the demonic stain threatens to erupt again, it is said that one of the Quietus Sons appears, not to interrogate, not to punish, to release. Their methods are unknown, their weapons vary, but when the job is done, there is no body, no ashes, no grave, only the faintest scent of burned incense and the feeling that someone, somewhere, has remembered you well. Some brotherhoods are more functional. The Iron Penitents are master forgers who work in meditative trance, inscribing every weapon they build with wards too small for the naked eye. They chant the threefold nullity as they work, etching each line with vibrations that cancel warp resonance. They do not speak in the forge, only in prayer. Others are esoteric. The Red Shrouds, for instance, are a brotherhood devoted to the masking of psychic presence. It is they who prepare the chapter's warships before warp translation, spreading sigils of unrecognition throughout the hull. They coat their armor in robes dyed with blood, taken only from those who died in exorcism rites, believing this grants them the blindness necessary to remain invisible to demons in the Imperium. They do not fight as frontline soldiers. They vanish into the fog of war, disrupting rituals, dismantling summoning engines, stealing warp-touched artifacts before they can awaken. Entire cult uprisings have collapsed because a single red shroud removed the key component of their rite in the middle of the night without leaving a trace. All brotherhoods report, in theory, to the chapter's reclusiarch. In practice, they are autonomous, semi-monastic orders guided by shared dogma and encoded tradition, older than most of the men who inhabit them. Each has its own initiation rites, its own internal signs, its own taboos. A brother may be cast out not for failure in battle, but for a look, a word spoken at the wrong moment, a gesture interpreted as invitation rather than refusal. Because all of the brotherhoods, no matter their role, exist for one reason: to contain what should never escape. The warp does not fight fair. It does not charge the lines. It whispers, it waits, it looks for cracks. The brotherhoods are the caulk in the hull of the soul. They are the glue that binds silence to memory, memory to identity, identity to discipline. Other chapters forge brotherhood in shared oaths, in victories, in the memory of their primarchs. The Exorcists do not speak their lineage. They do not chant their founder's name. They form no statues to their heroes. Instead, they gather in hidden rooms, among like minds. They kneel on floors made of silent stone. And they listen. They remember. They share nothing. But they know. It is said that if you ever enter the Basilica Malefics at night, when the stars are wrong and the warp winds rise, you might hear something beneath the silence. Not speech, not breath, but the low hum of unity. A dozen voices, 100 minds not speaking together. That is the sound of the Brotherhoods, and that is the sound of a chapter that cannot, will not, must not break. When the Cicatrix Maledictum tore the galaxy in half, it did not arrive as thunder or fire. It came like a wound that would not close, a gaping, shrieking rift carved across the stars, splitting real space from sanity, plunging half the Imperium into a darkness deeper than any void. And for a time, even the Exorcists paused. Not out of fear, but because they recognized the smell. To most of the Imperium, the opening of the Great Rift was an apocalypse. The Astronomicon dimmed. Warp storms erupted across Segmentum Obscurus. Demons poured from the edges of dreams into reality. Planets vanished. Time collapsed and restarted in strange spirals. Whole systems became haunted echoes of themselves. And in that chaos, the people of the Imperium cried out, not for salvation, but simply for sense. But to the Exorcists, this was not unfamiliar. This was not new. It was an echo of something they had already endured within the sealed chambers of their souls. Every brother who had survived the rite of possession had felt this before. The bleeding of logic into nightmare, the scent of rage without source, the gravity of thought slipping sideways. The warp had come to the galaxy, and the Exorcists were already there to meet it. Under Chapter Master Emir Vasaphon, who had led the chapter through the silent war against the Horned God, the Exorcists began what became known within certain inquisitorial circles as the Sable March. No declaration of war, no call to arms, simply a redirection of strength. A realignment of the chapter's role in a galaxy that was no longer metaphorically bleeding, but literally bleeding through holes torn in the skin of the stars. Unlike other chapters who struggled to receive astropathic communications or whose deployments were delayed by warp storms, the Exorcists moved like smoke through cracks. They had trained for this. Their librarians had long since learned to navigate not by light, but by absence, reading the holes in the warp, not the constellations. While Guilliman's Indomitus crusade surged across the Imperium like a thunderhead, the Exorcists moved beneath it, into the places the crusade would never reach. They did not attempt to win worlds. They sealed them. The records of these actions are thin as they are meant to be, but fragments remain, enough to trace the outlines of a hidden war. On the gas giant refinery world of Petron's Fall, Exorcist squads descended into the depths of platform cities that had ceased transmission months before. What they found were not survivors, but effigies. Workers nailed to reactor cores, heads split open and filled with incense and chimes that rang in harmony with the tides of the warp. A demon host, bloated and silent, floated at the heart of the largest refinery. It did not speak. It wept. The Exorcists made no vox requests. No reinforcements were summoned. The entire orbital platform was detonated within the hour. The official report blamed a fuel leak. No survivors were listed. On Morvalis 6, a shrine world severed from the Astronomicon, pilgrims began worshipping silence. Not the Emperor, not the saints, but silence itself. They chanted in unison with mouths closed, their thoughts bending the local warp signature into a pattern that attracted attention. The Exorcists arrived with no markings on their armor, no chapter insignia. They moved through the temples like ghosts. The central cathedral was burned from within, a psychic fire so clean it left no ash, only light. The local priests reported nothing. When the Inquisition arrived 3 months later, the cult was gone. The pilgrims were praying again, not to silence, but to a statue of the Emperor that had no face. And then came the torchbearers. The Adeptus Mechanicus called them emissaries. Others called them angels. They were the bearers of salvation, fleets tasked with delivering the Primaris Astartes' gene-forging technologies to isolated chapters. New organ implants, improved armor systems, enhanced physiology, and most importantly, reinforcements. When a torchbearer fleet finally found its way to the Narasima Reach, after losing 2 escort ships to warp predators and a third to an internal schism of reality, it arrived in ruin. Only 3 ships remained functional. The rest were empty husks, lifeless and echoing. But within the surviving ships were stasis vaults, each containing the future. Primaris gene stock, equipment, artifice, possibility. The Exorcists received them cautiously, not out of fear, but out of knowledge. These new warriors, grown in vaults and trained by doctrine, had not known the right. They had not been touched by a demon. They were pure in a way that the Exorcists no longer were. Pure, and therefore vulnerable. The Apothecarian was given leave to experiment. The Primaris organ systems were studied, dissected, augmented, and then, in what some within the Inquisition still call the Second Betrayal, the Exorcists performed the unthinkable. They subjected them to the rite. The first batch of Primaris aspirants, grown, trained, conditioned for war, were chained in the Hall of Tempering. Summoning rites were invoked, the binding sigils adjusted for new anatomy. The librarians watched and waited. The results were mixed. Some of the new breed failed catastrophically. Their enhanced psi interfaces, once thought to offer resilience, only amplified the possession. Demons sang through their bones. Those who broke were incinerated on the spot without judgment. Others, however, resisted. Some with such violence of will that their psychic presence was recorded in the Librarius as blinding. Not because of power, but because of sheer clarity. No distortion, no hesitation. They did not scream, they roared. These were accepted. The Exorcists dubbed them the Echo-born, not as a mark of rank, but as a warning. They had not merely passed the rite, they had reflected it. These Primaris became their own cult within the chapter, their own shadowed brotherhood, forged in a new kind of fire. Some librarians whispered that they had brought something back from the ritual, not possession, not corruption, but a deeper understanding. The Echo-born did not explain. They simply fought, and in battle they were glorious. Wielding modified Mark X armor adorned with micro-etched wards, Echo-born squads began deploying into rift-touched zones where the warp did not behave predictably. They were faster than the Firstborn, more direct, but also more alien. There were instances, minor but troubling. One squad broke ranks mid-assault, moving not toward the objective, but toward a structure that had not yet been discovered. A shrine buried under tons of rock. When questioned afterward, they claimed they heard it calling. Another detachment reportedly executed an entire squad of corrupted sororitas before their corruption had even manifested. The post-mortem revealed the sisters had been infected with a psychic parasite set to activate months later. The Echo-born had known. Such occurrences led to debate within the chapter's librarius. Were the Echo-born developing a new psychic awareness, a warp attunement? Had the possession ritual affected them differently, amplified by their Primaris architecture? No decision was reached, because the Exorcists do not seek answers. They seek results, and the Echo-born delivered.
Across the scarred face of the Imperium Nihilus, they struck. On dream-infected moons, in void temples that grew like tumors on asteroid belts, in time loops nested within demonic machines. Where reality bent, they walked straight. Where others fell screaming, they listened. And in their wake, the silence returned. The era Indomitus continues. The rift grows. The galaxy bleeds. But the Exorcists endure, as they always have, alone, unthanked, unnamed in glory. They do not raise banners. They raise barriers. They do not speak of hope. They enforce it. For even now, in this age of demons and fire, of broken stars and burning saints, one truth remains unbroken. The warp whispers. But the Exorcists are listening, and they remember how to say no. There is a price for every truth the Imperium dares not speak. A toll paid not in thrones or blood alone, but in silence, in secrecy, in the slow unraveling of souls who carry burdens no man was meant to bear. The Exorcists know this better than any, not because they sought forbidden knowledge, but because they were made from it, forged in it, bound to it, and every day, with every ritual, every war, every whisper unspoken, they pay. They are a chapter built on truths the Imperium refuses to acknowledge. That demons can be endured, that possession can be survived, that the warp can be known and still denied. But this knowledge is not freedom. It is a chain wrapped around the throat of every exorcist, one that grows tighter with each battle, each brother lost, each memory burned into flesh and mind. And though they bear that chain with discipline and dignity, it weighs on them. Always. There is no moment more revealing of this cost than when an exorcist falls. Not in war, not to fire or blade, but inward, where none can see. It happens quietly, sometimes without warning. A brother may have served 100 years, fought in dozens of exorcisms, silenced warp creatures that would unravel the minds of lesser Astartes. And then, one day, during maintenance in the vaults or training in the prayer chambers, he stops. He becomes still, not in meditation, but in absence. Those around him do not speak. They do not ask. They simply contact the penitent voice. The chaplain arrives without announcement. No ceremony. No judgment. He kneels beside the brother and places a gloved hand over his chest. If the brother's heartbeat matches the cadence of the null psalm, the silent rhythm every exorcist is trained to internalize during the possession rite, he is considered safe. A momentary lapse, a soul recoiling from too much knowing but returning to center. If it does not match, he is taken. There is no struggle, no protest. The brother knows what is happening. He may weep. Some do. Most are silent. They are escorted to the chamber of final recall, a place known only to the reclusiarch, the chief librarian, and the dread crypt's wardens. There, beneath a sky of iron and burning braziers, the exorcist speaks aloud, for the first and last time, what he remembers. Not all of it. Just enough. The shape of the demon that marked him, the name he almost said during the rite, the sensation that haunted him after the third war zone, the dreams that came not from his own mind. This confession is not recorded. It is not written. It is received by a remembrancer of the Enochian God who takes it not into archives but into his own mind, adding the fallen brother's burden to his own. This is the true cost of the Enochians. They are not veterans of war. They are carriers of memory, and some memories do not want to be carried. Once the confession is complete, the brother drinks from the chalice of stillness, a neuroreactive toxin that severs higher cognitive function. He dies peacefully, heart slowed, mind quiet. His body is taken to the vaults beneath the Basilica Malefics and offered to the Forge penitents, who cleanse the armor and prepare the gene seed for recovery. But sometimes
he survives. This is rarer. Only a handful of such brothers exist at any given time. They are known as the Enduring. They have been to the edge of madness and turned away. They remain silent, but their silence has changed. It is heavier, softer. Their presence unsettles even their brothers. The Enduring are never deployed again. Instead, they remain within the deepest levels of the Basilica, wandering the vaults, praying in unknown tongues, performing rituals no longer understood. Some believe they maintain psychic wards that keep the demons they once resisted from returning. Others think they are slowly dying, their souls unraveling, one thread at a time. No one truly knows, but the Exorcists honor them still, not for what they do, but for what they don't do. They don't speak, they don't leave, they carry. This burden, this unrelenting intimacy with the warp, does not only weigh on the individual, it shapes the chapter's destiny. For while the Exorcists remain loyal, incorruptible, and precise, the Imperium fears them. Not openly, but unmistakably. The Grey Knights, once curious allies, have become wary. After the purge of Epiphany and the strange emergence of the Echo-born, there are those within the Ordo Malleus who believe the Exorcists are no longer simply a tool, but a contingency, a force prepared not just to fight demons, but to replace those who fall to them, or worse, to survive when no one else can. The High Lords do not discuss this. The Ecclesiarchy pretends the chapter does not exist. The Administratum keeps their records incomplete by design. Even the Primaris reinforcements delivered during the Era Indomitus were treated as an experiment, not an asset. Because the Exorcists know. And knowledge is the one sin the Imperium can never forgive. So the chapter endures in shadow. They are not trusted, though they are always deployed. They are not praised, though their victories are essential. They are not thanked, though they fight for all mankind. And yet, they continue, without complaint, without pride, without voice. Because the Exorcists were not made to be heroes, they were made to suffer, to know what others must not, to carry what others cannot, and to fall silently, so others may rise. There is a wall within the Basilica Malefics. It bears no carvings, no inscriptions, no names, only notches, each one the same size, each one perfectly spaced, each one representing a brother who remembered too much. There are hundreds. Someday there will be thousands. And someday when the Imperium faces the ultimate darkness, not a horde, not a tyrant, not even the gods themselves, but the truth that no one else can carry. It will be the Exorcists who rise, not with banners, not with cheers, but in silence, because the cost of knowing is high, and they have already paid.